Hello, my name is Morgan Byrne, and I'm the director of our Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning here at Mount West Community and Technical College. And this is a recorded version of our Fall 2026 Committee Chair Training. If you have any questions about any of the following information, please do not hesitate to reach out to me via email. So in this session, we're going to be talking about a couple things that pertain to being a successful committee chair. We've got several different committees here on campus, and we want to make sure that they are all functioning at the best possible level that they can, and that all of our committee chairs have the support and resources that they need to be successful. Our session outcomes are as follows. At the very end of this session, you will be able to locate relevant resources and repositories for reports, develop meeting agendas and committee reports, and facilitate group discussions. We will be talking specifically about Robert's Rules of Order, but bear in mind everyone approaches meetings a little bit differently, and if you've got a spin that you want to put on something, that's fine. We do, however, have set rules, things that everybody's expected to do, especially when it comes to reporting. So this is our agenda. Number one, don't panic. It is not an emergency. Things that are happening within a committee, you do have time. You don't want to overwhelm yourself. More on that in a moment. We'll talk relevant materials. We'll talk about leading a meeting, for record keeping, executive and faculty council, especially for those who've never attended executive before. And then finally, some best practices. Just some things to keep in mind as you step into this new role, because we do have at least 2 new committee chairs taking these positions in the fall of 2026. But like I mentioned right at the top, please do not panic. You were chosen for this role for a reason. Committee chairs are elected. You are elected because people trust you, one, to get the job done, but also because you are intelligent, you know what you're doing. Even if you get overwhelmed, it's going to be okay. And you will have a group of people behind you, the entire campus really, behind you to support you as you move into this new position. Now, in the in-person version of this session, we did have a discussion here using this question. What are your current concerns about leading a committee? Of course, this is a pre-recording. I don't have anybody in my office with me as I'm recording this, but I do want you to pause the video for a second and take a moment and think about what your current concerns are before we get into everything else. I do still want you to have that kind of framework in mind as we progress. And there are a lot of concerns that are general that someone might have when they step into a role like this one. And those might be things like, what if I'm not as familiar with the procedures and policies as I thought I was? I've never uploaded anything to SharePoint, and SharePoint's really overwhelming. I've never led a discussion with my colleagues before. I know that was me. When I stepped into my role as chair of assessment, I'd never actually led a discussion with my colleagues. I had been part of, very vocal in, a lot of discussions, but I hadn't led one before, and I went into that thinking, I have no idea what I'm doing, major imposter syndrome, and some of this really is faking it till you make it, right? Throwing yourself into it and saying, I can do this, even if you feel like you can't. But I promise you that the majority of the concerns that you may be experiencing are concerns that either people in the room for this session felt, or at the very least, I felt. I had plenty of concerns when I stepped into this role. So you definitely are not alone. And as we progress, again, keep in mind, though important, committee work is not a life or death emergency. When I was a graduate student, and I was a TA, and I was teaching English 101, something that I was told by our director of graduate studies was that English 101 is not an emergency. And committee work is the same way. Ask questions, get assistance, take the time that you need for yourself to make sure that you get the info that is necessary and that you are getting the support that you need. But also, if you need to take a breath, go take a breath. This is not an emergency. Come to it when you are prepared and you are ready. I want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable as they get into these roles. So let's talk structure. So you've taken on this role as committee chair. What are your responsibilities compared to everyone else's responsibilities within that committee? So we'll go ahead and start with you. A committee chair is responsible for the following: organizing meetings and writing agendas, writing committee reports, and attending executive, and then leading committee projects and representing the committee when addressing the faculty at large. So, for example, those of you who have been to faculty council before already know this, but just as a reminder, right, at the very end of faculty council, we have committee reports. And the representative of the committee, the chair, is either going to summarize what has been discussed within the committee, summarize their report, or say refer to the report. Typically, refer to the report is utilized whenever nothing new has been going on. If there are some new initiatives within your committee, you should be briefing the faculty council. And remember too that report, which we'll talk about later, will have already been discussed in executive. We'll also elaborate a little bit more on what executive looks like later. But you do have a very public-facing role as the chair of this committee, not just within your small group, within your committee, organizing those meetings, writing agendas, facilitating those discussions, but also as a representative at executive and as a representative at faculty council. You will also have a committee secretary. In fact, if your committee has an open position for a secretary right after you've stepped in as chair, that's probably going to be first on your docket in your first meeting, is asking your committee members, all right, does anybody want to nominate a secretary? The secretary is responsible for writing meeting minutes, uploading those minutes to Teams and/or sending them to committee members, preferably both, and then keeping record of any additional materials. So, for example, if your committee is doing a bunch of outside research, digging into scholarly reports, things of that nature, and they all get submitted to the same place, your secretary might go in and make sure everything's in the right folder, kind of keeping Teams organized. Committee members are responsible for attending meetings, providing insightful and constructive input, and supporting committee projects. That is not to say that everybody's going to have the same opinion all the time. That is not going to happen, and that's a good thing. We want to encourage discussion, absolutely. But once that discussion has been had and compromises have been made, we want to make sure everybody's on the same page before that project gets out of that committee. So that way the team can work together. And then finally, a committee treasurer. I do have written in parentheses here, this is a little bit uncommon, and that is because we don't currently have committees that are working on these large-scale projects that take a whole lot of money. And we do not, at least to my knowledge, have any committee chair members that have purchase cards. But a committee treasurer would, in the event that we would have one, maintain the budget, resources, and purchase reports if applicable. But I note here, that's not often the case, but it can be if it is necessitated. All right, now we have relevant materials. These are things that are going to be coming through your committee, going off to faculty council and executive. So we'll go ahead and start with meeting agendas and meeting minutes. These stay within the committee. Hopefully in Teams and SharePoint, more on that in a second, but these are not presented to faculty council. These are not presented to executive. Your meeting agendas should include the meeting time, date, location, current committee members, and a bulleted list of content being discussed. They should be sent at least 3 days before the meeting. I understand that sometimes we're running late and a lot of stuff's happening all at once and it's the day of the meeting and I got to get that agenda out. Sometimes that happens. But highly recommend, when you can, giving committee members a couple days to review what they're going to be discussing. That way, everyone's on the same page when they come through that door. Next, we have meeting minutes. So again, these are kept by the secretary, and meeting minutes are a transcript of the content areas discussed, commentary provided by the members, and synthesis of any outside research if relevant. And that's only applies if the committee as a team has decided, okay, we're going to do that research. This absolutely does not mean that the secretary is responsible for any and all outside research. That is not what that means at all. They just might help in teams to keep everything organized. Next are your committee reports. These are the responsibility of the committee chair. Okay, and these are going to leave executive, or these are going to leave the committee and go to executive and faculty council. So this is a brief report, one paragraph perhaps, or a bulleted list explaining what the committee discussed or did during the month. So you don't have to do this for every meeting. Typically it's if your committee meets bi-weekly like mine tend to do, it's every month. Every 2 meetings, you will have a committee report. And then finally, recommendations. If your committee is proposing a new procedure, policy, etc., changes to reporting information, a formal recommendation will be written based on a provided template. Now, before we go any further, let's go ahead and actually look at some examples of what these agendas, minutes, reports, etc. can look like. Okay, let's go ahead and start with a committee report. So this is an assessment committee report from March of 2026. The members would be listed here. I went ahead and just highlighted their full names in black so that nobody can see them, just in case, to keep, private information private. And then we have our meeting time. So meeting every other Thursday at 2 p.m. So this month, the assessment committee has been working on the following, and then I detailed in this report everything that happened in March of 2026. So we determined assessment award winners. We looked at data from the previous round of course assessments, and according to the report run by Blackboard Ultra, this was what we found. So 111 reports were submitted. Here's performance data. It was great performance data. We looked specifically at assessment processes and the course shell survey that had been sent to gather as much feedback as possible. We put out a reminder about the questions added to the program assessment report. You get the idea. So we have our basic assessment information and then a bulleted list of everything that happened that month. I do tend to include a brief note here about additional information being available upon request, just in case, because I'm not going to get into the weeds of every single thing that we do in every single meeting, just because we have some meetings that are a full hour in length. There's a lot going on, and then we have others that are maybe 30 minutes. One really big thing, it was super important, but that was it. So if somebody wants the minutia of everything, that's why we have the minutes. But your committee report is just, here's the things that we worked on in that given month. The minutes, on the other hand, this is where we get a little bit more granular. So here again, we've got our committee, when and where things are happening. Our attendee list would be here. And then the general structure for this minute page is that we have our minutes reviewed and approved, and then the individual content areas that we discussed during that meeting. So this happened to be course assessment report assistance, course assessment rubric reports, preparing for program assessment, course assessment and modalities, and we can see these individual bulleted lists where we get into who said what and what the rationale was and setting dates and things of that nature. We end with when the next meeting is going to be and then when the meeting formally adjourned. So this has a little bit more going on in terms of detail. Now, I will note that for some committee minute documents, they are either more detailed or less detailed. It really just depends, one, on who the author is, and two, more importantly, what's going on in that committee and how detailed does it need to be. I think that these committee minutes, I'm not going to name the person who writes them, but she's fantastic at it. I think that this is perfect. It is the platonic ideal of committee minutes for me. You have your content area, you've got brief bulleted lists of what was discussed per content area. It also makes it really, really easy for someone in my position to then review those documents and put together this course assessment or committee report, not course assessment report. Goodness, so many reports. But it makes it a lot easier to write that committee report as those are being put together. Okay, so you've written your agendas, your reports. The secretary has put those fantastic minutes together. Now, where do they go? This is an especially important question right now in 2026 as we prepare our assurance argument and get ready for our HLC visit in October of next year. So we want to make sure that not only are our documents nice and clean and organized, but also our reporting process is as organized and streamlined as we can possibly make it. So let's go ahead and start from the most basic of basic documents for a committee. You've got your agenda. Where does that go? You're going to submit that to Teams, and that's going to be your specific committee Teams channel, SharePoint. If you have never submitted to SharePoint, have no fear. I'm going to show you how to get there here in a moment. The secretary is only responsible for uploading the minutes to Teams. Again, every single committee here at Mount West has a specific Teams channel. They're going to put them in that channel. Committee reports. So we're back to you, the committee chair. Your committee reports need to go to Teams. Really, everything goes to Teams because that's your hub of information amongst your group. SharePoint, and the faculty council secretary. So you have your committee secretary, but then you have the faculty council secretary. Faculty council secretaries organize committee reports. So you need to send that to them, preferably before executive. If possible, at the very least, have that prepared before faculty council. Recommendations. So if your committee is putting forth a recommendation for something, like previously, we had our Blackboard minimum use policy. When the online oversight committee put that together, it had to go to their Teams channel, of course, SharePoint, the vice president of faculty council, the president of faculty council, and the faculty council secretary. Everybody had to know, because that's going to go out to all faculty before faculty council meets. And then finally, if you've got research within your group, that's by default going to go to Teams. If that ends up informing a major decision, we can add it to SharePoint. I have that selected there just because that might get pulled as we're putting together our larger narratives for the assurance argument, but especially important that it go to Teams. Everything needs to be in Teams. So what's the deal with Teams and SharePoint? How do we utilize those? Let's go ahead and talk about them. Okay, so when you open Teams, you are likely to see this section here. So I'll hit my little team button, and these are all of the teams to which I currently have access. I am not in all of these committees. I have helped some of these committees. I have been part of or tangential to some of their projects, but there are specific channels that I am in charge of, and those are CETL down here and assessment. I occasionally pop into Gen Ed just because I handle the assessment and CETL stuff, but these are my two big ones. And I mention that because I'm going to show you how I have them set up. So when I go into the assessment committee, I noted apparently it used to default, I'm talking about Microsoft Teams specifically, used to default to the section where you had all of your folders. It doesn't do that anymore. I don't like that. You have to go to shared to get that information. So if I go to shared, I'm going to start in my just general documents section. And in my general documents section, I've got a lot of content. Some of that is from the previous assessment chair. If you've got documents in your Teams channel from the previous committee chair, leave them there. That might be super helpful. Just make sure they're organized. And you can see the previous assessment chair had everything very, very well organized. Their folders are up top. Mine are down here. I organize everything by semester. So I'm going to make this a little bigger just in case. So you can see where I took over in fall of 2024. So I have fall 24, 25. I have prep work for 26, and then spring 25 and spring 26. So everything is very carefully organized. Let's go ahead and go into fall 2024. All right, so in this section, we can see a folder just for agendas. So whenever there was an agenda for one of our meetings, it went in here. We met a lot that semester. So all of those are provided in that section. We can also see meeting minutes in their own bespoke folder, all appropriately labeled based upon the date. Again, whoever is the secretary of your committee, they might have their own specific way in which they label their documents, but I find this to be super helpful. You've got your date, time, year, and then the name of the committee and the words meeting minutes afterward. That is super helpful in terms of keeping track of what was happening and when. So I'm partial to this setup, but you certainly can do something else if you want to. You can see that there are a lot of other things in this folder: workshop prep, procedures, directions and FAQs, because we were working on a lot of projects, but everything for that semester is carefully organized. And the same can be said if we go to, for example, let's hit spring 25. Same deal. We've got agendas, course assessment report data, meeting minutes, program assessment, anything from student services. Everything is carefully organized within its own folder. And this also makes it really easy for you as the chair to go back in and review all of your documents. So I highly recommend taking advantage of your Teams channel as best you can. And also too, once you've got access to it, hopefully you already have access to it. You may have been a member of the committee before you were elected as a chair. But Once you get access to it, if it's not already set up this way, go ahead and get some folders in there. Make sure the rest of your committee has access to Teams, and make sure that everybody understands the naming conventions if you're going to set naming conventions for your different kinds of documents. But overall, it's pretty easy to use. Just to go ahead and do a proof of concept here, let's say that I wanted to upload a meeting agenda. All I'd have to do is go over here to my Create or Upload button, hit Files, Upload, and then I would just go and select a file. Hit open, and it would go right here into this list. And typically they default to being either in alphabetical order, or in the event that you, unlike these, don't have any actual tangible words in there, it will sometimes default to numerical order as well. So it kind of has a built-in organizer sometimes that makes your bits a little cattywampus. So that's a good as any reason to go ahead and make sure you have a strong naming convention in case you're worried about something like that. So that's Teams, and I can get back to my Teams channels by just hitting that little button right over here. If I go into Seedle, and then similarly hit shared, we're going to see a lot of the same things. Our individual semesters, in-service prep, blah, blah, blah. Our operations manual, workshop resources. So having those folders in there definitely keeps things organized. Now, I'm operating under the assumption that likely you're pretty familiar with Teams. However, SharePoint and the usage that we're kind of operating under right now, that's pretty new. That's roughly in the last 2 years or so. And not everyone had access or has access to every single part of SharePoint. So I'm going to talk about what I mean when I say in the slides that your committee reports and your agendas have to go to SharePoint. So to access SharePoint, you're going to go to your 9 dots up here in the upper left corner of Outlook, and you're going to launch this app right here, SharePoint, which is going to bring you to your Discover page. Hopefully your Discover page isn't as overwhelming as mine. I live in SharePoint. You can make it a little bit easier too. You'll notice in my recent sites, I have the Mount West Academic File site and the Mount West HLC 10-year visit. They have these little stars next to them that I've clicked on, so the background is like a greenish blue color. That sends them to my favorite sites over here in the bottom left part of the menu. So I don't really have to spend much time on my Discover page. I can just toggle between these two. At the very least, for you, I recommend favoriting your Mount West Academic File site because that's where you're going to go to submit this stuff. So if I launch the academic file site, again, you're going to see a lot of information. You do not need to worry about what you see on the bottom part of the screen. In fact, you want to go to this bar up here and select these 3 little dots to your navigation options. And you want faculty committee report / agenda. That's where we're going to go. So let's say you are a brand new committee chair. You are going to open Fall 26. And I've already created folders for all of our committees. All you have to do is find yours. So, for example, the Seedle team has already met. We met earlier this week. And while we don't have a committee report yet, because we haven't had a full month's worth of meetings, we do have an agenda. So I have my agenda folder, and there's my agenda for the meeting on Monday. You will do the same. So let me go ahead and go back to that Fall 26. Let's say that you are our new general education committee chair. Right now, there's nothing in here. It's just for you to do with what you want to do. What I would recommend is going over here to the right side of the screen and hitting Create or Upload, selecting folder, and then creating 2 folders, one for agendas, one for committee reports. And then as you write your committee report each month, as you write your agendas every other week, once you send those out to your team members, go ahead and plug them into SharePoint at the same time. It helps to keep things organized if you do all of that at once. And this also makes it really easy for the folks that are writing the assurance argument to then pull this information. We know that HLC wants agendas, minutes, committee reports. A lot of this is really solid evidence of the hard work you guys are putting in, especially as it pertains to student success. Really all of it pertains to student success. So Putting it in here makes it easier for everybody, including you guys, because you can highlight all the great stuff that you're doing. If you have additional questions about accessing SharePoint or Teams, by all means, shoot me an email, let me know. But remember, this is your chart. This is where everything needs to be, where they need to be sent in preparation for not just our HLC visit, but also in preparation for executive, for faculty council, etc. Okay, so let's talk about the meetings themselves. Mount West is a really big fan of Robert's Rules of Order, and for good reason. This provides a nice framework for organizing your committee discussions. And we start with call to order. You want to make sure that your attendance has hit quorum. Quorum is a little over half of the attendees within your committee. So for example, assessment has 9 committee members. So if we have 5, 6, we're pretty good. We're good to go, right? So we want to make sure we hit quorum first. Then we have approval and or correction of minutes. So hopefully the committee accessed those minutes before the meeting. But what we do in assessment is I put the meeting minutes up on the screen. This typically happens in faculty council as well. Everyone reviews those minutes. If any corrections need to be made, those are proposed. The secretary handles those revisions, both in committee meetings and in faculty council, and then they are approved. After that, you do any old or unfinished business from a previous meeting before moving into new business, announcements, and then the adjournment, or as I like to call it when I'm doing the assessment or CETL meetings, that silly little dance we have to do to get us out of this room. Robert's Rules of Order, if you're new to leadership, provides a really great framework. It's super helpful. Even somebody like me who has a knee-jerk to any kind of framework like this that says you must do X thing this way, it does make things easier. So if you are stepping into this role and you've never facilitated a conversation with your fellow faculty members before, especially if you're talking about something as big as committee work, this general structure helps to keep things organized. It can also help you to put together your agenda as well. You can start with, again, the approval of those minutes. That's content area 1, your old or unfinished business, and have your bulleted list there, then your new business announcements, etc. So that helps to keep everything moving in the way that it should. So what happens in executive? You have your committee meetings. We've talked about those. What about executive? We do a lot of the same things. We review minutes. We make sure to approve those. We still follow that same structure of old business and then new business, then announcements, etc. But in those content areas, we talk about committee reports. So you, as the leader or representative from your committee, you are going to report on the progress from your team. This is not the time to be a person of few words unless nothing is happening. If your committee only met once, it's the end of the semester, things are kind of winding down, it's okay to say that. But if we are in the thick of the semester and your committee's working on a lot, executive really wants to know about it. We're also going to have academics-wide initiative discussions. So major changes to classroom tech, data reporting, and more are typically featured in executive before they reach faculty council. The same thing can be applied to recommendations and comments and concerns that are shared anecdotally amongst colleagues or have been brought to faculty council, maybe from administration. Any recommendations that are coming out of a committee, those are all discussed in executive before they reach faculty council. So it makes sure that all of the leaders are on top of everything that is being discussed. Any of the feedback from within the committees is reported there, and then we go to faculty council and it's brought to everyone. So we've gotten, the people who need to be really, really in the know are in the know before it reaches faculty council. All right, so what are some standard best practices for being a successful committee chair? Number 1, set a timer for each content area. I'm actually stealing this from our current faculty council president, who is fantastic at this. Our faculty council meetings have run pretty long before, 3 hours plus, at least one time that I've been here. And when he took over, he said, okay, I'm setting a timer for 10-15 minutes. And once that's up, we are moving on from this subject matter. And that really helps to keep things rolling. So if you know that you've got a lot to get through in one of your committee meetings, set a timer. If you've got 4 agenda items, 10 minutes for each one. Super helpful. Send the meeting time survey early. So, for example, we are a week and some change out from the launch of classes for fall 2026. The assessment committee members are going to get an email next week with a survey asking, okay, what is your teaching schedule? Let's go ahead and get these meetings scheduled. Let's get them on the books. So don't wait until the last minute to get those scheduled. Try to get those out early and make sure they are consistent across the semester. Don't be afraid to assign tasks either. Those committee members are there to assist you. We've got a really excellent collaborative campus. People are typically really jazzed to work together. So if you need a little bit of assistance, that's what your committee is, your committee, add an extra syllable there. That is what they're there for. So if you're doing research, for example, there are a couple different elements that you want people to consider. Assign some roles. That is what they're there for. Keep in regular contact with your committee, so email, Teams, etc. It's really not great if somebody asks your committee member, hey, what are you guys doing in co-curricular right now? And if your committee member says, I don't know, I haven't heard from my chair in like a month, we want to avoid that, right? We need to keep in consistent communication. We want to adhere to the committee purpose statement that is provided in our faculty handbook and constitution. Whatever is listed for your committee, that's what you are working on. Nothing more, nothing less. Focus on what's in that statement. Communicate with other committees as is necessary. As a member of the assessment committee, I talk to Gen Ed pretty frequently. I talk to co-curricular pretty frequently. Because of CEDL, I work with the online oversight committee, and that's a good thing. I know not just a lot of what these awesome projects are that my colleagues are working on, but I can also help. And they can also ask assistance, or I can ask assistance of them if I need additional hands-on to do something that they are experts in. So be in communication with other committees. That's super helpful. Request a meeting with the previous chair. If you are brand new and you are nervous, go ahead and have a sit down with them. Get some coffee on campus and meet for like 30 minutes to talk about what their previous initiatives were, what their biggest successes were, maybe one or two things that they were not worried about, but planning to work on as the committee moved forward. That will give you a nice foundation as you step into this role. Organize and upload your documents all at once. I mentioned that a second ago because they need to go to Teams and to SharePoint. Just do it in one fell swoop as opposed to waiting and doing it later. You might forget if you wait. So do it all at once. And remember to breathe. Remembering to breathe is really, really good advice always. But again, committee work is not an emergency. You have a campus behind you that supports you. Please do not feel like you are alone. No one is going to get up there and judge you if you stutter or use the wrong word. Everybody's done that before. It is not a life or death emergency, so please just remember to breathe. So yeah, the Higher Learning Commission is going to be here next year. That's big, but you're not alone. I'm more than happy to help you with literally anything that I can, and so are the rest of your colleagues. Again, you were chosen for this position for a reason. You are doing a fantastic job, and I can't wait to see what you create with your committee. Now, I do have the QR code provided here that will take you to the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning's survey. This is the recorded version. I really don't know when you're watching this, but on the off chance that you are still watching this before the fall 2026 semester as part of in-service, I would really appreciate it if you could scan that QR code and complete that survey. Again, if you have questions, comments, concerns about being a committee chair, please by all means let me know, but it's really kind of fun, and I promise you'll get the hang of it. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you have a great day. Bye!